Found out about my sister's party on Instagram, so I bought the venue and canceled it. I was sitting on my worn-out gray sofa, the kind you get for $100 on Facebook Marketplace, scrolling through my phone to avoid thinking about the pile of work on my desk. It was a Saturday night, and the silence in my small apartment was only broken by the hum of the old refrigerator. That's when I saw it. A picture posted by my cousin, tagged with half our family. My sister Megan was in the center beaming, holding up her left hand to show off a diamond ring. Her fiancé Marcus had his arm around her, looking proud. The caption read, "Celebrating Megan and Marcus' surprise engagement party success." I found out about my sister's engagement party on Instagram, so I bought the venue and canceled it. My own parents were there, celebrating without me. Subscribe and leave a like to see where my reaction led me. They were all there. My aunts, my uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years, and right there beside Megan were my own parents. My mother was laughing, her hand on Megan's arm, and my father was raising a glass of champagne. Everyone looked so happy, so elegant. The room they were in was beautiful, with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city skyline. The geotag said, "The Starlight Ballroom." I stared at the photo for a full minute, my thumb frozen over the screen. I wasn't just not invited. I was erased. It felt like looking at a family portrait from which I'd been carefully cut out. My phone didn't ring. No one sent a text saying, "Oops, we forgot you." The silence from my family was louder than any explanation. My first feeling was a deep, cold ache in my chest. It wasn't a surprise, not really. Things with Megan had been strained for years. She saw my quiet, focused life, my small apartment, my freelance consulting work, my lack of a flashy boyfriend, as a personal failure. A failure that reflected poorly on her. She wanted a perfect Instagrammable family, and I, with my sensible shoes and my student loan debt, didn't fit the aesthetic. But my parents, that was different. Seeing them smiling, celebrating a moment this big without me, felt like a betrayal I couldn't process. I scrolled through more photos under the hashtag they'd created. Checks Marcus, pewtering on it. Classy. In one photo, Megan was hugging our mother, and something caught my eye. Around Megan's neck was our grandmother's sapphire necklace. My breath hitched. It was a heavy, antique piece, a deep blue stone surrounded by tiny diamonds. Grandmother Rose had left it to me in her will, explicitly. I remembered her sitting with me, her hands frail, telling me, "This is for you, Olivia, for your strength. It's a quiet strength, like the stone, but it's deep." I had asked my mother to keep it safe in her jewelry box until I had a proper safe of my own. And there it was, around my sister's neck at a party celebrating her, a party I wasn't even aware of. Suddenly, the hurt in my chest sharpened into something else. It was cold, clear, and methodical. This wasn't just a social snub. This was a calculated move. They weren't just excluding me. They were stealing from me, piece by piece, hoping I wouldn't notice or wouldn't have the courage to fight back. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the quiet, overlooked daughter who would just cry into her pillow and accept her place on the sidelines. My grandmother's words echoed in my head. A quiet strength, but it's deep. I put my phone down and opened my laptop. I typed "The Starlight Ballroom" into the search bar. The venue was part of the Crestview Hotel Group. A wave of dark irony washed over me. I had spent 6 months last year doing a financial restructuring project for their corporate office. I knew their booking policies, their management structure, their loopholes. I still had the direct number for a man named Frank, a senior vice president who owed me a favor after I found a multi-million-dollar accounting error that was about to land him in serious trouble. My hands were steady as I dialed his number. It was late, but I knew he worked all the time. "Frank," I said when he answered, my voice even. "It's Olivia. I need a favor." I explained the situation quickly, professionally. I told him there was an event in the Starlight Ballroom tonight, booked under my mother's name. I asked him to check the payment status. He put me on hold. The silence stretched on, and I could hear the distant sound of a siren outside my window. "You're in luck, Olivia," Frank said, coming back on the line. "They paid the deposit, but the final balance is due by midnight tonight. It's standard procedure for last-minute bookings. If it's not paid, the contract is technically in breach." My heart started beating faster. "Is there a corporate override? A buyout clause for a priority event? There is, he said slowly, but it's expensive. You'd have to cover their deposit plus a premium. How much? I asked. He told me the number. It was nearly all of my savings, the money I had been carefully putting away for a down payment on a small house, the money that was supposed to be my escape. I looked around my tiny apartment. I looked at the picture of my smiling, happy family on my phone. And I thought of my grandmother's necklace. I'll take it, I said. Put it on my card. I'm booking the venue for a private corporate function, effective immediately. What's the function? Frank asked, a hint of confusion in his voice. A hostile takeover, I replied, and my voice didn't waver. I gave him my details. I heard him typing. A few minutes later, an email confirmation popped up in my inbox. The Starlight Ballroom was mine for the rest of the night. I then asked Frank for the event coordinator's email and my sister's contact information from the booking file. He gave it to me. I composed a new email. The recipient was the on-site manager. I CC'd Megan. The subject line was simple: event cancellation. The body of the email was even simpler. Per my rights as the new contract holder for the venue, the private party in the Starlight Ballroom is terminated. Please have all guests vacate the premises within the next 30 minutes. I signed it with my full name, Olivia. I hit send. And then I leaned back on my sofa, the old refrigerator humming beside me, and I waited for the chaos to begin. They had started a war, but they had no idea I was the one with all the ammunition. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. The only sound in my apartment was my own breathing and the steady hum of the refrigerator. I sat perfectly still on my sofa, my phone face up on the coffee table. It felt like I had pulled the pin on a grenade and was now just waiting for the explosion. I imagined the scene at the Starlight Ballroom, the music stopping, the lights coming up, a confused manager approaching my mother with a tablet in his hand. I pictured my sister's perfect, beaming smile faltering. The thought sent a cold, satisfying shiver through me. Then, my phone lit up. The caller ID simply said, "Mom." I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a slow breath to steady my voice. "Hello? Olivia?" Thank God. My mother's voice was a frantic whisper. "Honey, there's some kind of terrible mistake here. The hotel manager is saying our party is canceled. He's talking about a breach of contract. Can you believe it? After I paid the deposit and everything?" I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. "Olivia, are you there?" she asked, her voice laced with impatience. "He's saying someone else bought out the venue for the night, some corporate event." "It wasn't a mistake, Mom," I said calmly. "I bought the venue. It's my corporate event." The silence on her end was profound. I could hear a faint murmur of voices in the background, the confused chatter of a party being shut down. "You... what? What are you talking about? Why would you do that?" "Why wasn't I invited?" I asked, my voice flat. She scoffed, a short, dismissive sound. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Olivia. It was just a small get-together. A last-minute thing for Megan and Marcus. We were going to tell you all about it tomorrow." "You posted a hashtag," I said. "The entire extended family is there, and you're celebrating my sister's engagement with our grandmother's necklace around her neck. The one she left for me." "She was just borrowing it," my mother snapped, her voice rising. "It looks beautiful on her. You keep it locked away. Jewelry is meant to be worn. This is typical of you, Olivia. You have to make everything about you. You have to ruin your sister's big night because of some petty jealousy." "You are trespassing on my property," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "The manager has been instructed to have security escort you out if you're not gone in the next 20 minutes. I suggest you leave quietly." I hung up before she could reply. My hands were trembling slightly, but my mind was clear. 2 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Megan. "You have 5 seconds to explain what you think you're doing," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "I don't think I need to," I replied. "It seems pretty self-explanatory." "Are you insane?" she shrieked, and I could picture her perfectly, her face red, her manicured hand gesturing wildly. "You just had your own family thrown out of a party. Dad is furious. Marcus's parents were here. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I imagine it's very humiliating, I said. Almost as humiliating as finding out about your sister's engagement party on Instagram. Oh, get over yourself, she spat. This is why you weren't invited, because you cast this gloomy, pathetic shadow over everything. We wanted a happy night, and you're just not happy. Look at your life. This tiny, sad apartment, your boring little job. Is this because you're jealous? Because I have Marcus and a beautiful life, and you have your spreadsheets? The words were meant to cut, and they did. But they also fueled the cold fire inside me. Give me back my necklace, Megan. Mom said I could wear it, she said defiantly, and I'm going to keep it. It was meant for someone who has a life worth celebrating, not for someone who spends her Saturday nights ruining things for other people. She hung up. I stared at the black screen of my phone. So that was it. They weren't just excluding me. They were actively rewriting our family's history, retconning our grandmother's wishes to fit their perfect narrative. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Frank. Event is cleared. Your mother tried to argue about the catering bill. Security handled it. The ballroom is now empty and available for your hostile takeover. Let me know if you need anything else. I typed a quick thank you and set the phone down. Then another text came in. It was from my father. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks. His message was short. Your sister is in tears. You've embarrassed this family enough for one night, Olivia. Fix this. Fix this. He wanted me to fix the wound they had created. He wanted me to apologize for reacting to their cruelty. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. They still didn't get it. They thought this was a tantrum. They thought I would back down. Just as I was about to turn my phone off for the night, one last message came through from a number I didn't recognize. This is Marcus, Megan's fiancé. You made a very expensive, very public mistake tonight, Olivia. My family was there. My business partners were there. Megan is upset, and when she's upset, I fix the problem. This is far from over. I read the message twice. His tone wasn't angry like Megan's or frantic like my mother's. It was calm, controlled, and infinitely more threatening. He wasn't just some proud fiancé. He was a player, and he had just officially entered the game. A small, grim smile touched my lips. Good. I was just getting started. The next morning, the sun streamed through the single window of my apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The adrenaline from the night before had evaporated, leaving behind a bitter metallic taste in my mouth and the cold weight of Marcus's text message burning in my mind. This is far from over. I had slept for maybe 2 hours, my brain refusing to shut down. I made coffee, the cheap kind from a can, and sat at my small desk, which was really just a slab of wood on 2 filing cabinets. My laptop was open to a complex financial model I was building for a client. Work. I had to work. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Mr. Howard, the head of a mid-sized logistics company I'd been consulting for almost a year. It was my biggest and most stable contract, the one that paid my rent and allowed me to put a little into savings each month. The subject line was urgent, regarding our contract. My stomach tightened. I opened it. The email was brief and filled with chillingly polite corporate jargon. Dear Olivia, it began, following a strategic review of our Q4 operational expenditures and vendor partnerships, we have made the difficult decision to terminate our ongoing consulting agreement, effective immediately. While we appreciate the contributions you have made, recent information has come to our attention that necessitates a realignment of our external collaborations to mitigate potential reputational risk. Reputational risk. The words hung in the air. He didn't say what the risk was. He didn't have to. I knew who had whispered in his ear. Marcus. It was a clean, brutal, and deniable attack. He hadn't slandered me directly. He had simply planted a seed of doubt, a vague but toxic suggestion that associating with me was bad for business. For a man like Howard, who valued stability above all else, that was enough. In a single email, Marcus had just cut my income in half. I leaned back in my chair, the cheap plastic groaning in protest. For a moment, I felt a wave of genuine fear. He could do this. He could dismantle my entire life, client by client, until I was left with nothing but my student loan debt and this tiny apartment. Megan was right. He was in a different league. I was bringing a knife to a drone fight. Was a sapphire necklace, even one with so much meaning, worth this? Worth ruin? My eyes drifted to a small framed photo on my desk. It was of me and my grandmother Rose, taken years ago at a county fair. We were both smiling, sharing a cone of cotton candy. She was the one person in my family who had always seen me, truly seen me. She understood that my quietness wasn't weakness. My grandmother Rose always used to say, "A debt is a debt, whether of money or of heart, and it must always be paid." Megan and my mother owed me a debt of the heart. Marcus, with his attack on my career, had just opened a new account, a financial one, and I was going to make sure they all paid in full. The fear receded, replaced by the same cold clarity I'd felt the night before. They thought my strength was quiet. They were about to find out how loud quiet could be when it was focused. Marcus wanted to play a corporate game? Fine. I wrote my own rules. I spent the rest of the day not on my remaining client work, but on a new, unpaid project. Marcus. His full name was Marcus Thorne. His family's company, Thorne Investments, was a private equity firm known for aggressive acquisitions. They bought struggling companies, stripped them for parts, and sold off the profitable bits. They were sharks, but very successful ones. His digital footprint was pristine, curated by a public relations team to show a handsome, charitable young heir preparing to take over the family business. There were photos of him at galas, on yachts, shaking hands with politicians. It was a perfect, impenetrable facade. But no company is perfect. No business dealing is completely clean. My job as a consultant was to find the cracks in a company's foundation, the hidden liabilities, the inefficiencies everyone else missed. I did it to help businesses get stronger. Now, I would use those same skills to tear one down. I didn't look at their private dealings. That would be illegal and foolish. I started with what was public. Regulatory filings, press releases, shareholder reports from the companies they had acquired. It was tedious, mind-numbing work, hours of scrolling through dense legal documents and financial statements. My eyes burned from staring at the screen. By evening, I had a headache and a stack of digital documents that told me nothing. They were too good, too clean. I was about to give up for the night when I found it. It was a footnote in an obscure quarterly filing for a manufacturing company Thorne Investments had bought 2 years prior. The company, Precision Parts Inc., had been on the verge of bankruptcy. Thorne swept in, bought it for pennies on the dollar, and, according to the press releases, orchestrated a miraculous turnaround. But the footnote mentioned a small local supplier, a family-owned business called Keith's Metal Works, that had filed a lawsuit against Precision Parts just before the acquisition, claiming non-payment for a massive order. The lawsuit had been abruptly dropped a week after the Thorne deal was finalized. It was probably nothing. Big companies settle small lawsuits all the time. It's cheaper than fighting. But something about it felt off. Why would a small, family-run business that was owed a life-changing amount of money suddenly drop their case? It didn't make sense. I did a quick search for Keith's Metal Works. It was still in business, barely. Their website looked like it was from 1998. But they had a phone number. My heart started to beat a little faster. Marcus had used his network to hurt me. It was time I started building my own. I picked up my phone, my finger hovering over the call button. This was a long shot, a wild guess based on a single footnote. But it was a thread, and I was going to pull it. I took a deep breath and pressed the call button. It rang 4 times, and I was about to hang up when a man with a tired, gravelly voice answered, "Metalworks." "Hello," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. "My name is Olivia. I'm a consultant, and I'm looking for the owner of the business." "You found him," the man said. There was a clatter of metal in the background. "What do you want? If you're selling something, I'm not interested." "I'm not selling anything," I said. "I wanted to ask you about an old client of yours, Precision Parts Inc." The silence on the other end was immediate and heavy. The clatter stopped. "Don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice suddenly guarded. That was a long time ago. I know, I said gently. I also know they were acquired by Thorn Investments shortly after you had a business dispute with them. I'm researching Thorn's acquisition practices. Anything you could tell me would be confidential. He let out a short, bitter laugh. Confidential, right. Listen, lady, I don't know who you are, but I got a family to feed and a business to run. Whatever trouble you're looking for with the Thorn family, you can leave me out of it. He was about to hang up. I had one shot. Marcus Thorn is trying to destroy my career because I stood up to his fiancée, I said, the words coming out in a rush. He thinks because he has money and power, he can crush anyone who gets in his way. He did it to me, and I think he did it to you too. The line was quiet for a long moment. I could hear him breathing. What's your name again? He asked. Olivia. Hold on, he said. I heard a door scrape shut, and the background noise of the workshop faded away. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. What do you know about my lawsuit? I know you filed it for non-payment on a very large order, I said. And I know you dropped it right after Thorn took over. It doesn't look like a settlement. It looks like you were pushed. He sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry years of frustration. Pushed is a gentle way of putting it. They bled us dry. We delivered $500,000 worth of custom-machined parts. They kept claiming quality control issues, demanding revisions, stalling payment. By the time we sued, we were mortgaged to the hilt just to cover the material costs. Then in walks Thorn's lawyer, a shark in a $2,000 suit. He didn't offer a settlement. He offered an execution. My knuckles were white from gripping my phone. What did he do? He laid it out for me, the man said, his voice flat with remembered defeat. He said they would countersue us for breach of contract over the supposed quality issues. They would drag it through the courts for years. He said, Mr. Keith, we have 100 lawyers on retainer. How many do you have? He said by the time it was over, even if I won, I'd have no business left. No house, nothing. Or I could take $50,000, 10 cents on the dollar, and sign a piece of paper saying I would never, ever talk about it to anyone. Ever. The non-disclosure agreement, I whispered. It was exactly as I'd suspected, only more brutal. I had 2 kids in college, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I took the deal. That money barely kept the lights on for 6 months. I had to lay off half my guys. Some of them had been with my dad. It almost killed me. I thought of my grandmother's words. A debt is a debt, whether of money or of heart, and it must always be paid. Marcus and his family didn't just pay their debts for pennies on the dollar. They created new ones, debts of pain and humiliation, and expected to walk away scot-free. What was your name? I asked softly. Earl, he said. Earl Keith. Earl, I said. That NDA prevents you from talking about the settlement. But does it prevent you from sharing documents that existed before the settlement? There was a pause. What do you mean? I mean things like the original purchase orders, the signed delivery receipts, any emails from Precision Parts Accounting Department from before Thorn took over, acknowledging the debt. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. The lawyer took most of that as part of the deal, said he needed to close the file. My heart sank. Most of it? Yeah. Most, Earl said, and for the first time there was a flicker of something other than defeat in his voice. But my wife, she's a pack rat. She keeps everything. She made digital copies of all our invoices and correspondence before the lawyers ever showed up. For our records, she said. She never trusted them. My breath caught in my throat. Earl, would you be willing to share those records with me? Why? He asked, the caution returning. What are you going to do with them? Marcus Thorn's power comes from his perfect reputation, I said, my voice low and intense. He builds his empire by crushing people like us in the dark and then buying their silence. I'm not going to let him do it anymore. Your story, backed up by those documents, won't break an NDA, but it will create a pattern. And I'm willing to bet you're not the only person he's done this to. I'm going to find the others, Earl, I'm going to bring them all into the light. The silence stretched on. I held my breath, waiting for his decision. I'll have my wife email you the files, he said finally. You give that bastard hell, Olivia. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding with a feeling that was entirely new. It wasn't anger anymore. It was purpose. An hour later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject was records. Attached was a zip file. I clicked download. As the progress bar filled, I felt like I was downloading ammunition. The first round in a war Marcus Thorne didn't even know he was fighting. He had tried to take my livelihood. Now, I was going to take his legacy. I opened the zip file and my laptop's fan immediately whirred to life, protesting the sudden workload. The screen filled with hundreds of neatly organized folders, each named with a date and an invoice number. It was a digital graveyard of a man's dream. I got up and walked to my tiny kitchen, which was really just a corner of the living room. As my cheap coffee maker sputtered and gurgled, I leaned against the counter and looked out the window. My apartment faced a brick wall, but if I craned my neck, I could see a sliver of the downtown skyline, the same skyline that served as the backdrop for Megan's perfect engagement photos. They were in the Starlight Ballroom, sipping champagne. I was here with a brick wall and a cup of bitter coffee, about to dive into a corporate crime scene. I took a deep breath, the smell of burnt coffee filling the air, and sat back down at my desk. I started with the oldest files from 3 years ago. The initial emails between Earl and Marcus's company, Thorne Industries, were friendly, almost warm. Looking forward to a long partnership, Marcus had written in one. Your craftsmanship is exactly what we need. There were purchase orders for custom-made gears and components, all for a new line of high-end manufacturing equipment Thorne Industries was launching. For 6 months, everything looked normal. Invoices were sent, payments were received. Earl's business was growing. Then, the pattern started. A payment would be a few days late. Then a week. The emails from Earl's wife, whose name I now saw was Rose, were polite at first. Just a friendly reminder about invoice number 743. The replies from Thorne's accounting department were full of corporate jargon. We are currently optimizing our payment cycles for improved vendor synergy. Your invoice is in the queue for processing. It was meaningless, designed to confuse and delay. My father always said, "You can't build a strong house on a rotten foundation." I was looking at the rotten wood Marcus Thorne used for his empire. The real evidence was in the delivery receipts. Each one was signed by a Thorne Industries receiving manager. Proof of delivery. But when I cross-referenced them with the final payment statements from Thorne, the numbers were off. An order for 50 units would be logged, delivered, and signed for, but the final payment statement would claim only 40 were received. A discrepancy of a few $1,000s here and there. Small enough to argue over, small enough for a big company to dismiss as a clerical error. But over 6 months, those clerical errors added up to nearly $200,000. That's when I found the email that made my blood run cold. It was from Marcus himself, sent to his head of accounting, a man named Howard. The subject was Precision Parts Liquidation. It was dated a week before he officially terminated Earl's contract. Howard, the email read, we have enough components from the last shipment to cover the initial production run. Stall on all outstanding payments. Their cash flow is already critical. Another 2 weeks without our payment and they'll be forced to default on their loan. We can acquire their inventory and patents for pennies on the dollar during the bankruptcy auction. Make it happen. He didn't just default on a debt. He planned it. He starved a small business out on purpose to pick its bones clean. It was predatory, precise, and evil. My hands were shaking. This was more than just a business dispute. It was a blueprint for destruction. I scrolled through the rest of the files, my anger turning into a cold, hard focus. I was looking for a loose thread, anything that could connect this to someone else. And then I found it. Buried in a long email chain about a disputed shipment was a CC'd address I didn't recognize. It wasn't a Thorne Industries email or a Precision Parts email. It was from a small, independent textile company, Weaver Textiles. The email was from a woman named Jennifer, and her message was panicked. We're having the exact same issue with our last 3 shipments to Thorne. They're claiming we delivered damaged goods but won't provide proof. Our invoices are 30 days past due. The reply from Thorne's accounting was a carbon copy of the ones Rose had received. We are investigating the quality control issue and will process payment upon resolution. Weaver Textiles. Jennifer. I quickly opened a new browser tab and searched for the company. The first result was a business directory listing. Weaver Textiles, permanently closed. My heart sank. He'd done it to them too. I spent the next 2 hours digging. I found old articles about Weaver Textiles, a family-owned business praised for its innovative organic fabrics. I found their old social media pages filled with photos of beautiful designs. And then I found Jennifer. Her professional profile said she was now a freelance design consultant. She had moved from a business owner to a gig worker just like me. Marcus hadn't just closed her business. He had knocked her down the ladder, forcing her to start over from the bottom. I knew I had to contact her. But how? A cold email would be ignored or deleted. She was probably bound by the same soul-crushing NDA as Earl. Approaching her the wrong way could scare her off forever, or worse, get her into legal trouble. I stared at her profile picture. She looked tired but resilient. She had the same look in her eyes that I saw in the mirror every morning. I thought about my sister, Megan, laughing in her beautiful dress, completely unaware of the kind of man she was marrying. She wasn't just marrying a successful businessman. She was marrying a monster who built his success on the ruins of people like Earl, like Jennifer, like me. I crafted a short, careful message. I didn't mention Marcus Thorne. I didn't mention Thorne Industries. Hi, Jennifer, I wrote. My name is Olivia. I'm a consultant working with small business owners who have faced challenges with large corporate partners. I came across the story of Weaver Textiles and was incredibly impressed with your work. I believe we might have a shared experience. Would you be open to a brief, confidential conversation? My finger hovered over the send button. This was it. The first real step. Earl's documents were the ammunition, but Jennifer, she could be the first soldier in my army. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and clicked send. The message disappeared into the digital void. Now, all I could do was wait. The next 3 days were a special kind of torment. I kept my phone on the table beside my laptop, screen up, a constant, glowing temptation. Every notification, a spam email, a news alert, a software update, made my heart jump into my throat. I tried to work, to lose myself in spreadsheets and market analysis for my clients, but my focus was shot. My mind kept drifting back to the message sitting in my sent folder. Had I been too forward, too vague? Had she seen the name Olivia and just deleted it? Another piece of digital junk mail? I barely slept. I'd wake up at 3 a.m, the blue light of my phone illuminating the familiar water stain on my ceiling, and I'd check my email again. Nothing. During the day, I'd find myself holding my breath for no reason, my shoulders tight with a tension that wouldn't release. It felt like I had thrown a single, fragile lifeline into a vast, dark ocean and was just waiting to feel a tug. Without Jennifer, all I had was a box of old files. I had proof of a crime, but she was the human cost. She was the story. On the third afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call. It wasn't an email notification, but my stomach clenched anyway. The caller ID showed a picture of my sister, Megan, smiling on a yacht. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some masochistic curiosity made me answer. Hello? I said, my voice flatter than I intended. Olivia? Hi. I have 2 seconds. I'm in the middle of a cake tasting, she chirped. I could hear muffled voices in the background. Listen, I need a favor. Of course she did. What is it, Megan? So Marcus and I found the most amazing photographer for the wedding, but he's super exclusive. He requires a 50% deposit to hold the date, and my platinum card is almost maxed out from the ballroom deposit. She paused, as if this was a common, relatable problem. It's only $5,000. Could you just transfer it to me? I'll pay you back. Eventually. I was speechless. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. She hadn't invited me to her engagement party, hadn't even told me she was engaged, and now she was calling to ask for $5,000. You're kidding, right? Her tone shifted from bubbly to icy. What's your problem? It's for my wedding. You know, the most important day of my life, something you wouldn't understand. The most important day of your life, which I found out about on Instagram, I shot back, the words tasting like acid. Along with the rest of the world. There was a brief silence. Oh, that, she said dismissively. It was a last-minute thing, mostly Marcus's friends. You would have been bored. Anyway, about the money? No, Megan, I'm not giving you $5,000. Fine, she huffed. Don't expect to be a bridesmaid then. The line went dead. I dropped the phone onto the sofa as if it were hot. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Bridesmaid? The thought was so absurd it was almost funny. She didn't want a sister. She wanted a bank. She and Marcus were a perfect match. They both saw other people as resources to be exploited. I thought about my father's words again, how he always said, "You can't build a strong house on a rotten foundation." Megan was about to move into a mansion built on the wreckage of other people's lives. The foundation wasn't just rotten, it was radioactive. The anger cleared my head. It burned away the anxiety and left behind a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just doing this for Earl or for Jennifer. I was doing this for myself. To prove that my quiet, non-Instagrammable life had value. That my sensible shoes stood on solid ground. Just as I was thinking this, my laptop pinged with an email notification. My heart stopped. The sender was Jennifer W. The subject line was blank. My hand trembled as I moved the mouse to click on it. The message was only one sentence long. Where and when. That was it. No greeting, no questions, just a demand for logistics. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever read. She was scared, but she was willing. It was the tug on the lifeline I had been waiting for. I typed back immediately, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "Thank you for your reply," I wrote. "How about tomorrow at 2 p.m.? There's a quiet coffee shop called The Daily Grind on Maple Street. It's usually empty in the afternoon. We can get a table in the back. My treat." I chose the place carefully. It was public, but not crowded. A place where two people could talk without being overheard. It was halfway between my apartment and the last known address for Weaver Textiles. Neutral territory. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. A few minutes later, another reply came. Okay, just one word. It was enough. I spent the rest of the night preparing. I organized Earl's files into a clear chronological narrative. I printed out the key emails, the initial friendly exchanges, the stalling tactics from accounting, and the final damning message from Marcus to Howard. I put them in a plain manila folder. I didn't want to overwhelm her, just show her she wasn't alone. I laid out my clothes for the next day, simple black pants and a plain blue blouse. I wanted to look professional, trustworthy. Not like a woman who spent her nights plotting revenge from a worn-out sofa, but like a consultant who knew what she was doing. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I wasn't thinking about Megan's party or the $5,000. I was thinking about Jennifer's one-word reply. Okay. It was a seed of an alliance, and I was going to make sure it grew into something Marcus Thorne would never see coming. The next day, I arrived at the Daily Grind 20 minutes early. It was exactly as I'd remembered, quiet, smelling of roasted coffee beans and old books, with a few mismatched armchairs in the corners. I chose a small table in the back, shielded by a large potted fern. It gave me a clear view of the door, but offered us privacy. I ordered a black coffee I didn't want and placed the manila folder on the table beside me, its weight feeling both heavy and hopeful. My hands were cold. I kept clasping and unclasping them under the table. What if she didn't show? What if this was some kind of trap set by Marcus? I pushed the thought away. I had to trust my gut, and my gut said Jennifer was as much a victim as Earl. At 2 o'clock on the dot, the little bell above the door chimed. A woman walked in, pausing to scan the room. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her late 30s, with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a simple, severe ponytail. She wore a plain gray coat over jeans and a sweater. There was nothing about her that screamed victim, but there was a tension in her shoulders, a wariness in the way she moved. Our eyes met for a second, and I gave a small, hesitant nod. She walked over to my table. "Are you the one who emailed me?" she asked, her voice low and even. There was no accusation in it, just caution. "I am," I said, motioning to the chair opposite me. "Please sit down. Thank you for coming. I'm Allison." She sat but didn't take off her coat as if she was ready to bolt at any moment. I'm Jennifer. What is this about? It's about Marcus Thorne, I said, keeping my voice just as low. And it's about Weaver Textiles. Her expression didn't change, but a muscle in her jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, I said gently. I pushed the manila folder across the table toward her. My friend's father was named Earl. He was a supplier for your company. Marcus ruined him. Jennifer stared at the folder, then at me. Her eyes were searching for something, a trick, a hidden angle. Who are you? Why do you care? Marcus is about to marry into my family, I said simply. I don't want to see anyone else get hurt. It was the truest thing I could say without revealing the whole messy story of my sister's party. This wasn't about my hurt feelings anymore. It was bigger. She finally opened the folder. Her fingers, I noticed, were steady. She wasn't fragile. She was a fighter who had run out of ammunition. She flipped through the pages silently. I watched her eyes move back and forth, absorbing the printed emails, the falsified invoices, the record of payments that were promised but never made. She paused on the final email, the one from Marcus to Howard, the one that called Earl acceptable collateral damage. She read it twice. When she looked up, the careful mask of indifference was gone. Her eyes were blazing with a cold, hard anger. This is it, she whispered, tapping the paper. This is how he does it. He finds small, family-run businesses, people who can't afford a long legal fight. He promises them the world, runs up a huge credit line, and then just disappears. Creates a new shell company. Moves on. So Earl wasn't the only one, I stated, though it wasn't a question. She shook her head, a bitter smile touching her lips. Not even close. My father started Weaver Textiles. We made high-end fabrics. Marcus came to us with a huge contract for a new hotel chain he was supposedly supplying. It was enough to keep us running for years. We took out loans to meet the demand. He paid the first 2 invoices, just enough to get us in deep. Then the excuses started. Accounting errors. Waiting on the client. By the time we realized we weren't getting paid, we were already bankrupt. She finally took off her coat. She was staying. I'm so sorry, I said, and I meant it. Her story was Earl's story. It was the story of every person Marcus had ever stepped on to get ahead. Looking at him in his expensive suits at my sister's engagement party, you'd never know. My father always said, a fancy suit can't hide a cheap character. I was finally starting to understand what that meant. Sorry doesn't pay the bills, she said, but the edge in her voice was softer. She looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time. You said he's marrying into your family, your sister? I nodded. Megan. Does she know? She wouldn't believe me if I told her, I admitted. She thinks he's perfect. She thinks I'm just jealous. Jennifer let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course. He's charming. He knows how to sell the dream. She leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. I tried to fight him. I hired a lawyer. But Marcus is smart. He buries everything in layers of corporations. My lawyer said we'd spend $100,000 just to find the person we were actually supposed to be suing. I lost my family's company. I couldn't lose my house, too. Seeing my family celebrating without me, especially my parents, felt like a carefully cut-out portrait. What would you do if you were erased from your own family's biggest moments? Comment your thoughts and share this story. We sat in silence for a moment. The folder lay between us, a testament to the damage one man could cause. He's not going to get away with it, I said, my voice filled with a conviction that surprised me. Not this time. Jennifer looked at the evidence again, then back at me. A spark of something I hadn't seen before appeared in her eyes. Hope. What's your plan? I'm still working on it, I confessed. But I know his weakness. It's his image. He's obsessed with appearing successful and powerful, especially in front of my family. If we can expose him publicly, right before the wedding, he'd be ruined, she finished, a slow smile spreading across her face. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her, and it transformed her. He's hosting another one of his investor dinners in 2 weeks, at the Starlight Ballroom. It's where he finds his new money, his new victims. The same place he had the engagement party, I said, the irony not lost on me. Exactly, Jennifer said, her eyes gleaming. It's all about the show. But I know something he doesn't think I know. He has a private financial advisor, a man named Frank, who handles the dirty work, moving the money between the shell companies. If we could get to him... The first step was Frank. Jennifer and I sat in her small, neat kitchen, the folder of evidence open on the table between us like a battle plan. The smell of old coffee and quiet desperation hung in the air. He's a creature of habit, Jennifer said, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on a printed-out photo of a nondescript man in his 40s. Frank. He had thinning hair, glasses, and the kind of face you'd forget a second after seeing it. He was the perfect ghost to handle Marcus's dirty money. He gets the same coffee from the same place every morning at 8:15. He eats lunch at the same sandwich shop at 1. He leaves his office at 5 on the dot. He's a machine. A machine with access to everything, I murmured, studying the photo. He looked like an accountant, not a criminal mastermind's right-hand man. I remembered my father's words, the ones that had been echoing in my head for weeks. A polished surface can hide the deepest cracks. Frank didn't even have a polished surface. He was just dull gray concrete. But underneath, he was the foundation of Marcus's entire empire of lies. We can't just walk up to him, I said. He'll know something is wrong. I know, Jennifer agreed. I'm toxic to anyone in Marcus's circle. If he saw me anywhere near Frank, he'd have him on a plane to a country with no extradition treaty by nightfall. She looked at me, her gaze intense. But you're a blank slate. You're just Megan's jealous little sister. No one would ever suspect you. A plan began to form in my mind, delicate and dangerous. His laptop, I said. He takes it to lunch with him, right? Jennifer nodded. Always. He works right through his pastrami on rye. Then that's our way in, I said, my heart starting to beat a little faster. We don't need to talk to him. We need to talk to his computer. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Jennifer, it turned out, had a tech-savvy nephew who owed her a favor. He provided us with a tiny USB device no bigger than my thumbnail. It's a keylogger, he had explained over a crackly phone line. Plug it in for 5 seconds and it'll install itself. After that, it'll copy every keystroke he makes and email it to a secure address. Passwords, bank accounts, private messages, everything. The risk was enormous. Getting caught meant more than just failure. It could mean serious legal trouble. But the thought of Megan marrying that monster, of my family welcoming a con artist who destroyed lives like Jennifer's, was worse. We spent a day watching Frank from across the street, sitting in Jennifer's beat-up Honda Civic. He was exactly as she'd described. Predictable. Boring. At 1 o'clock, he walked into a little deli called The Daily Grind. Through the window, we watched him sit at his usual table in the back corner, open his sleek silver laptop, and begin typing. That's your moment, Jennifer whispered, her voice tight with tension. He's focused. The place is busy. Lots of people moving around. The next day, it was my turn. I stood outside the deli, my hands trembling. I was wearing an outfit I'd bought from a high-end consignment shop, a blazer and trousers that looked expensive but had cost me less than $100. I needed to look like I belonged in his world, not like the girl from the tiny apartment with the worn-out sofa. I took a deep breath, clutching a large coffee in one hand and my purse in the other. Inside my purse, the tiny USB drive felt as heavy as a brick. I walked in. The deli was loud, filled with the lunchtime rush. I saw him immediately, tucked away in his corner, his eyes glued to his screen. He was the only calm person in a sea of chaos. I started weaving my way through the tables, my eyes locked on the USB port on the side of his laptop. It felt like it was a mile away, 10 feet away, 5 feet. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I just had to trip, make it look convincing. I took another step, caught my foot on the leg of an empty chair, and pitched forward. "Oh my God!" I yelled as the hot coffee flew from my hand, splashing all over the sleeve of his gray suit jacket and his table. Frank jumped up, startled and angry. "What the hell?" he shouted. "I'm so sorry," I gushed, pulling a wad of napkins from a dispenser. "I'm so clumsy. Let me help you clean that up." I leaned over the table, dabbing frantically at his jacket with one hand. With my other hand, shielded by my body and my purse, I found the port. My fingers fumbled for a second, then the tiny drive slid into place. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. I kept dabbing, apologizing over and over. 4,000, 5,000. I pulled it out, dropping it back into my open purse. It was done. It's fine. Just leave it, Frank said. His voice clipped with annoyance as he tried to wipe his laptop with a dry napkin. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, of course, I said, my voice shaking for real this time. I stood up straight, trying to look mortified. I'm just so terribly sorry. I started to back away, ready to run. The mission was accomplished. But then he looked up at me, his eyes narrowing slightly behind his glasses. The irritation on his face was replaced by a flicker of confusion. Wait a second, he said, tilting his head. Do I know you? You look very familiar. My blood ran cold. A million thoughts crashed through my head at once. Had he seen me somewhere? Did he know Jennifer? Was this whole thing a trap? I forced a laugh, a shaky, high-pitched sound that didn't sound like me at all. Oh, that's funny, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I get that all the time. You must be thinking of my sister Megan. We're twins. Well, not identical, but people get us confused constantly. She's much more outgoing than I am. I said her name, Megan, like a shield. It felt risky, like handing him a piece of the puzzle, but it was the most believable lie I could invent on the spot. His face, which had been pinched in suspicion, softened just a little. Your sister? Frank repeated. I don't know a Megan. Oh, well, she gets around, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. She's in finance like you. Well, her fiancé is. Marcus. Maybe you know him? I was pushing it, I knew. But I had to make the connection seem random, social, utterly harmless. His eyes flickered. The name Marcus clearly registered. I see, he said slowly, his analytical gaze sweeping over me one last time. The anger about the coffee was gone, replaced by a mild, professional curiosity. He had slotted me into a category, the clumsy, less important sister of a fiancé of a business associate. Perfect. Look, I've made a mess of your suit, I said, shifting back into my role as the mortified klutz. Please, let me give you my card. Just send me the bill for the dry cleaning. It's the least I can do. I fumbled in my purse, my fingers closing around a cheap business card I'd had printed at a kiosk with a fake name, Allison, and a burner phone number. He took the card without looking at it. It's not necessary, he said, waving a dismissive hand. It's just coffee. No, I insist, I said, backing away. I feel just terrible. So sorry again. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and walked, not ran, through the crowded deli. Every step felt like I was walking on a tightrope over a canyon. I could feel his eyes on my back. I pushed the glass door open and stepped out into the cool air, my lungs burning. I didn't look back. I slid into the passenger seat of Jennifer's Honda, slamming the door shut. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely buckle my seatbelt. Drive, I gasped. Just drive, now. Jennifer didn't ask questions. She pulled away from the curb smoothly, merging into traffic. We drove for 5 minutes in complete silence before she finally spoke. Did you get it? I nodded, reaching into my purse and pulling out the tiny USB drive. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger. It looked so small, so insignificant. He recognized me, or he thought he did. I told her everything that happened inside. The coffee, the lie about Megan, giving him the fake card with the name Allison on it. Jennifer listened, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Saying you were Megan's sister was a huge risk, Olivia. It was the only thing I could think of, I said, my voice still trembling. It made me seem harmless, irrelevant. She glanced at me, and a slow grin spread across her face. It was also brilliant. You turned their own snobbery against them, the forgotten sister. They'd never suspect you. We drove to her apartment, a small but neat place on the other side of town. The whole way I clutched the USB drive in my fist, the metal growing warm against my skin. Once inside, she locked the door and pulled the blinds shut. She grabbed her laptop from her bedroom, a high-end machine covered in coding stickers. "All right," she said, her voice all business. "Let's see what secrets Mr. Frank is hiding." I watched as she plugged the drive into the side of her computer. A folder popped up on the screen. It wasn't password protected. My heart leaped. It was too easy. "That's sloppy of him," Jennifer murmured, already clicking through the folders. They were filled with hundreds of documents, spreadsheets, legal contracts, private emails. It was a digital map of Frank's entire professional life. "What are we looking for?" I asked, leaning closer. "Anything with Marcus's name on it," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She typed his name into the search bar. Dozens of files appeared. She clicked on the first one, an email chain with the subject line, M&M Asset Transfer. My breath caught in my throat. M&M, Megan, and Marcus. The emails were dense, full of legal and financial jargon I didn't understand, but Jennifer understood. Her eyes widened as she scrolled down. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," she whispered. "This is big. Bigger than I thought." "What is it?" "He's not just moving money," she said, pointing at a line of text. "He's creating shell corporations. He's taking money from his investors, funneling it through these fake companies, and then reporting it as a loss. But the money isn't lost. It's being rerouted to an offshore account." She kept digging, opening spreadsheets that tracked the flow of money. Millions of dollars, all stolen. Marcus wasn't just a successful fiancé, he was a thief on a grand scale, and Frank was the architect of the whole scheme. This was the money that paid for the Starlight Ballroom, for the diamond ring, for the perfect life Megan was so proud of. It was all built on lies. A cold fury settled over me. This was more than enough to ruin them. But then Jennifer stopped on another email. This one was different. It wasn't from Frank. It was from Marcus, and it wasn't addressed to Frank. It was addressed to my father. The email was dated 6 months ago. Marcus was explaining a small cash flow problem and asking for advice on how to creatively manage the accounting. My father's reply was short and to the point. He'd sent Marcus the name of a specialist, a man who could make problems like that disappear. The specialist's name was Frank. I stared at the screen, at my own father's name, at his words. He hadn't just attended the party. He hadn't just smiled for the pictures. He had introduced them. He had known. He knew his future son-in-law was a crook, and he helped him. He chose to protect Marcus's criminal secret and exclude me, his own daughter. The party wasn't just a social slight. It was a strategic decision to keep the person who might ask questions, the person who wasn't blinded by money, out of the circle of trust. The ache in my chest returned, sharp and unbearable. "Olivia?" Jennifer said softly, her hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer for a long moment. I just stared at the screen, at the proof of my family's ultimate betrayal. The hurt was so deep it felt like it was freezing me from the inside out. Then the ice turned to steel. I looked at Jennifer, my eyes clear and my voice steady. "We're not just going to expose them," I said. "We're going to take everything." My words hung in the air of my small apartment, heavy and cold. Jennifer looked at me, her expression shifting from shock to a kind of quiet respect. She pushed her laptop back a little, giving us space. "Okay," she said, her voice even. "Take everything. What does that look like?" I stood up and started pacing the worn patch of carpet between my sofa and the television. The initial fire of my anger had cooled into something harder, something more useful. It was a cold, clear focus. "If we just send this to the authorities," I began, thinking aloud. "Marcus goes to jail. Frank probably goes with him, but my father will play dumb. He'll say he just made an introduction, that he had no idea what Frank was really doing. And Megan will play the victim. She'll cry on Instagram about her broken heart and how she was deceived. She'll get sympathy, she'll rebrand. In a year, she'll be engaged to someone else, and this will just be a sad chapter in her perfect life story." I stopped pacing and looked at Jennifer. "That's not enough. They don't just get to walk away. They chose this. My father chose a criminal over his daughter. Megan chose a lifestyle built on stolen money over her own sister. They have to lose what they value most. Money and reputation, Jennifer said, nodding slowly. She was already clicking, opening new tabs. Exactly, I said. So we don't start with the police. We start with the people Marcus stole from. Jennifer pulled up a spreadsheet. It was a list of investors, with amounts next to their names. Some were small, $5,000 or $10,000. But one name at the top had a string of zeros after it that made my stomach clench. $5 million. The name was Albert Harrington. Who is he? I asked. Jennifer did a quick search. Albert Harrington, she read. Old money, inherited a real estate empire and tripled it. He's known for being ruthless in business. He sits on the boards of 3 major charities. His family has been a pillar of the community for a century. Being scammed by a flashy nobody like Marcus wouldn't just cost him money, it would be a deep public humiliation. A slow smile spread across my face. It felt unfamiliar. He's perfect, I whispered. He's our wrecking ball. What's the play? Jennifer asked, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. We don't just give him the information, I explained. We package it. We show him exactly how Marcus used his $5 million. We trace it from his account, through the shell corporations, and right to the payment for the Starlight Ballroom. We show him the wire transfer that paid for Megan's diamond ring. We make it personal. We make him feel like Marcus spit in his face. He won't just sue, Jennifer mused. He'll bury him. That's the idea, I said. He has the resources and the rage to dismantle Marcus's entire operation from the inside out before the feds even get their shoes on. He'll freeze his assets. He'll claw back every penny. Next, I turned my attention to my sister. What's the one thing Megan cares about more than Marcus? The wedding? Jennifer answered without hesitation. She's been posting nonstop about her wedding planner, a woman named Caroline. They're having lunch next week at some exclusive restaurant to finalize the venue. Good, I said. The day Marcus's life implodes, I want Megan to be sitting at that lunch. I want her to be picking out flower arrangements when her credit card gets declined. I want the news to break while she's surrounded by the very people whose approval she craves. The final piece was my father. The email was the key. A simple leak wouldn't be enough. It had to be undeniable proof of his involvement. Jennifer, can you find out who is on the board of directors for my father's company? I asked. A few clicks later, a list of names appeared on the screen. I recognized a few of them. Men my father had played golf with for years. Men who trusted him. His entire reputation is built on being a smart, cautious businessman, I said. He advises people. He manages their expectations. What happens when his partners and clients find out he knowingly advised his daughter's fiancé to hire a money launderer? He's finished, Jennifer said simply. No one will trust his judgment again. The plan was forming, a 3-pronged attack aimed at their finances, their social standing, and their professional lives. We would give Albert Harrington the ammunition to destroy Marcus financially. We would time the fallout to create a public spectacle that would mortify Megan. And we would use the email to poison my father's reputation from within his own circle. Jennifer worked for another hour, creating separate, encrypted files for each part of the plan. One for Albert, containing the financial data. One for a gossip columnist we'd leak to at the perfect moment, detailing Megan's extravagant spending with stolen funds. And one for my father's board of directors, containing only the email chain between him, Marcus, and Frank. When she was done, she looked up at me. It's ready, Olivia. All you have to do is say when. I took a deep breath. The ache in my chest was gone. There was no sadness left, only a cold, hard certainty. I thought about them. All of them. Laughing and drinking champagne in that ballroom, celebrating a future built on lies while I was sitting alone in my tiny apartment. They had cut me out. They thought I was nothing. They thought I was weak. My grandmother used to tell me that the quietest people are the ones you have to watch out for, because they're the ones who are always listening. I picked up my phone. Jennifer had already found Albert Harrington's private office number. It's time, I said, my voice steady. Let's light the first match. I dialed the number. The phone rang twice before a crisp, formal voice answered. Harrington. Mr. Harrington, I began, my voice even. betraying none of the turmoil inside me. My name is not important. What is important is that I have information regarding Marcus Vance and the funds he manages for you. There was a pause on the line. I could picture him in his high-rise office, a man who didn't suffer fools. I'm listening, Albert said, his tone sharp with suspicion. I believe he has misappropriated a significant amount of your capital, I continued, using the sterile language of business. I have prepared a file containing transaction records, bank statements, and communication logs that will prove it. It details a systematic transfer of your funds into shell corporations controlled by a man named Frank Miller, a known money launderer. Another silence, this one longer. Who is this? He demanded. Someone who believes that people should face the consequences of their actions, I replied. I am sending you an encrypted file to your private email address. The password is the name of your first boat, the Siren. Once you open it, you will have everything you need to financially dismantle Marcus Vance. I heard the faint sound of a keyboard clicking. He was checking. How do you know that name? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. I do my research, I said simply. Just as you're about to do yours. Marcus has stolen over $2 million from you, Mr. Harrington. He used it to buy an engagement ring, among other things. I imagine you'll want it back. The clicking stopped. I heard a sharp intake of breath. The file just arrived, he said. His voice had changed. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a cold fury. If this is what you say it is, I interrupted. And more. Good luck, Mr. Harrington. I hung up before he could ask another question. I looked at Jennifer, who was watching me with wide eyes. The first match is lit, I said, a strange calm settling over me. She nodded, a small, grim smile on her face, and turned back to her laptop. Time for part 2? She asked. Time for part 2, I confirmed. The next target was Megan. Her currency wasn't money, not really. It was social status, admiration, the envy of others. Her entire identity was built on the perfect, curated image she projected on social media. Taking away her money wouldn't be enough. I had to take away her audience. Jennifer had already compiled the second file. It was a portfolio of Megan's vanity. Screenshots of her Instagram posts showing off new Chanel bags, $5,000 shoes, and weekend trips to the Hamptons. Next to each post was a corresponding bank statement from one of Marcus's shell accounts, showing the purchase was made with Albert Harrington's stolen money. It was a detailed, undeniable timeline of theft and luxury. Who's the lucky recipient? I asked. Jennifer pulled up a website. It was a notorious city gossip blog, famous for its ruthless takedowns of socialites. The columnist, who went by the name City Serpent, was known for never retracting a story and for having sources everywhere. Sending it to her anonymous tip line now, Jennifer said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The subject line is, "The real price tag of the city's newest power couple." A moment later, a confirmation popped up on the screen. It's sent. We sat in silence for about 20 minutes, the only sound being the hum of my old refrigerator. Then Jennifer gasped. Olivia, look. She turned her screen towards me. The gossip blog's main page had a new banner at the top. In bold, flashing letters, it read, "Exclusive exposé dropping at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Find out which newly engaged socialite has been funding her lavish lifestyle with dirty money. You won't believe who her fiancé has been stealing from." It was happening faster than I'd imagined. Megan's perfectly constructed world was about to be shattered in the most public way possible. She would wake up tomorrow morning a pariah. Her friends, the ones who commented with fire emojis on her posts, would be the first to share the article, feasting on her downfall. Now, for the final piece, the one that hurt the most to plan, but was the most necessary. My father. It's time for the last one, Jen, I said softly. Jennifer's expression softened with a flicker of concern. Are you sure about this, Olivia? I thought of my parents' smiling faces in that photo. Celebrating. Raising a glass to the man who was building a future for my sister with stolen money, all under my father's expert guidance. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had replaced me with a version of the family that was shinier, wealthier, and more acceptable. They had made their choice. Now I was making mine. I'm sure, I said. Send it. She didn't create a flashy portfolio for this one. There was no need for commentary or explanation. She simply attached one file to an email. It was the complete, unedited chain of messages between my father, Marcus, and Frank. It showed my father not just aware of the scheme, but actively advising Marcus on how to best structure the payments to avoid detection. It was professional malpractice and a shocking betrayal of trust, all in black and white. Jennifer typed in the email addresses of the 7 other members of my father's company's board of directors. She set a timer. The email would be sent at 9:15 a.m. tomorrow, exactly 15 minutes after the gossip blog was set to publish its story. It would give the board members just enough time to see the public scandal erupt before the private, professional one landed in their inboxes. As I watched her schedule the email, my grandmother's words echoed in my mind. My father, my sister, all of them. They saw me as quiet, insignificant. They never bothered to listen to me, but they never realized I was always listening to them. My grandmother used to tell me that the quietest people are the ones you have to watch out for, because they're the ones who are always listening. It's done, Jennifer said, closing her laptop. All the dominoes are set up. I stood up and walked to my small window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in a beautiful apartment I'd never been invited to, my sister was probably sleeping soundly, dreaming of her perfect wedding. Somewhere in a suburban mansion, my parents were proud of the match she'd made. They had no idea that their world was balanced on the edge of a knife. All we have to do now is wait for the sun to come up, I said, and then we watch them fall. I didn't sleep. I sat on my worn-out gray sofa, the same one I was sitting on when I saw the party photos, and watched the city slowly turn from inky black to a soft pre-dawn purple. The hum of the refrigerator was a steady companion. At exactly 9 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from the gossip blog Jennifer had contacted. The headline was brutal and direct. City's golden couple gilded with stolen gold, fiancé Marcus accused of multi-million-dollar fraud. The article was a masterpiece of controlled demolition. It laid out the scheme in simple terms, using the documents I'd found, and was filled with screenshots of Meghan's lavish Instagram posts. The sports car, the designer bags, the 5-star vacations, all juxtaposed with quotes from the defrauded investors, one of whom was a retired teacher who had lost her life savings. The comment section exploded. It was a feeding frenzy. People who had liked Meghan's photos just hours before were now posting popcorn emojis and calling her a scammer. Her perfect, curated world was being ripped apart in real time. At 9:17, my phone rang. It was Meghan. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. On the 4th try, I answered and put it on speaker. Her voice was a shriek, a sound I hadn't heard since we were children, and I'd accidentally broken her favorite doll. "What did you do?" she screamed, her voice cracking with a mix of tears and pure rage. "My phone is blowing up. Everyone is sending me this article. You ruined my life, Olivia. You ruined everything." I waited for her to take a breath. "I didn't ruin your life, Meghan," I said, my voice surprisingly calm and even. "I just turned the lights on. The mess was already there." "This is because of the party, isn't it?" she sobbed. "You're this petty? You would destroy my entire future because you weren't invited to a party?" I almost laughed. It was so much bigger than that, but I knew she would never understand. "No, Meghan, it's because you and Mom and Dad built a family that didn't have room for me in it. You didn't just forget to invite me. You decided I didn't belong. I just decided to agree with you." I hung up before she could respond. 20 minutes later, my mother called. Her tone was different. It was the wheedling, pleading voice she used when she wanted to smooth things over without ever admitting fault. "Olivia, honey, what is going on? Your sister is hysterical. And your father, he just got a call from the chairman of the board. There's an emergency meeting. What have you done?" "I sent them some light reading," I said. "The same things I found in Marcus's files. The messages where Dad advised him on how to hide the money." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "You can't," she whispered. "That's your father. That's your family." "He made his choice when he helped the man who was stealing from people," I replied. He made his choice when he stood there, raising a glass at a party for my sister, and didn't even think to call his other daughter. You all made your choice. This is just the consequence. She started crying then, a soft, defeated sound. We can fix this. Just tell them you made it up. We'll say you were angry, that you forged it all. No, Mom, I said firmly. The time for fixing things is over. Now is the time for things to be what they are. I ended the call. I spent the rest of the day in a strange quiet. I didn't look at the blog or social media. I didn't need to. I could feel the shockwaves spreading through the city, through my family, without seeing them. Late in the afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I knew who it was. I opened it to find my father standing there. He looked 10 years older than he had in the party photos. His expensive suit was rumpled. His face was pale, and his eyes, for the first time I could ever remember, looked lost. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood in the hallway of my cheap apartment building. They suspended me, he said, his voice a hollow rasp. The board. They're launching a full internal investigation. My career, everything I've worked for 40 years. It's gone. I just looked at him. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet, heavy finality. Why? He asked, his voice breaking. Olivia, why would you do this to me? To us? You never saw me, Dad, I said softly, and the truth of it felt clean and sharp. You looked at me, but you never saw me. You saw a disappointment. Someone who wasn't shiny enough for the family portrait. You saw someone quiet. You were so busy listening to the loud, impressive people like Marcus that you forgot I was in the room. My grandmother used to tell me that the quietest people are the ones you have to watch out for, because they're the ones who are always listening. He stared at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes, a horrifying recognition of his own blindness. He had underestimated me his entire life, and that was his fatal mistake. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I closed the door. My small apartment was silent again, but it wasn't the lonely silence of before. It was a peaceful silence, a clean slate. I walked to my window and looked out at the city lights, the same lights I had looked at the night before. They didn't look like they belonged to someone else's world anymore. They just looked like lights. My life wasn't perfect or flashy, but it was mine. And for the first time, that felt like more than enough. The sun was setting, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that tomorrow I would wake up free. From a silent observer to the one making the final move. He underestimated me his entire life, and that was his fatal mistake. My life is mine now. What did you think of my quiet revenge? Subscribe for more intense stories.